Hi, it's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is be. It's the same verb as yesterday. This is part 2 of our discussion. Yesterday, we talked about some of the common meanings for the verb be, and I'm going to revisit those really quickly. We use the verb be to mean to exist. We also use it to mean to take place or to occur. A final way we use be is to have a particular state, quality, identity, nature, or role, or something else. We'll see lots of examples of that in later sentences. We talked yesterday that be is an irregular verb. To make the progressive tense, all we do is add ing to the verb. Now, you won't hear a lot of sentences using continuous with be, but you will hear it when we're talking about acting or behaving as a meaning. Yesterday, we worked on sentences in the simple present, present perfect, and present progressive. Today, we're going to focus on the past tense. And the past tense is irregular, as I've mentioned. Be is were when the subjects are you, we, or they. Be takes the form of was when the subject is I, he, she, or it. As a reminder, the participle form of the verb is been. B-E-E-N. Let's take a look at some phrasal verbs. I mentioned in yesterday's video that there are so many different phrasal verbs with be. And even though I'm going to have 4 videos this week that are discussing 6 or 7 different phrasal verbs, we're still not going to cover them all. I've tried to pick out ones that I think might be more common for you to hear or that you might see when you're reading. Let's look at our first phrasal verb, which is be against. And its meaning is to oppose someone or something. Here it is in a sentence. They were against the proposed tax increases. Another phrasal verb you might hear is be back, and that means to return. Here it is in a sentence. We were back by 8 p.m. Another phrasal verb you might hear is be by, and it means to be near. Here it is in a sentence. I looked for help, but no one was by. Another phrasal verb you might hear or see is be off, and its meaning is to be disconnected or to not be working. Here is an example sentence. Was the water off? The opposite of be off is be on. So its meaning is to be connected or to be working. Here's an example. The light was on. Another phrasal verb you might hear is be up to. And its meaning is to be able to do something. Here's an example. I wasn't up to doing yard work in the heat. So in that sentence, I'm saying I wasn't able to do it. Finally, the last phrasal verb we're going to look at today is be with. The first meaning for be with is to be company with someone. So you might hear people say, I was with my friends last night. But another meaning for this verb is to work for a company. Here that is in a sentence. I had been with the company for 5 years before I was promoted. Let's continue using be in a few different verb tenses. As I mentioned earlier, we're going to focus on various forms of past tense today. And we'll start with simple past. Generally, when we're talking about the simple past tense, I tell you it doesn't matter what your subject is. all the verbs are the same in the affirmative and negative. Unfortunately, that is not true with be. So you might remember from the beginning, be can be was or it can be were in the simple past tense. When we're using simple past tense, we're talking about actions that were completed at a definite time in the past. So you'll see some signals that indicate a definite time in the past in these sentences. But I'm going to warn you that they will not be, these time signals, I should say, are not going to be in every single sentence. Sometimes it's going to be implied through the course of your conversation or through a particular paragraph or story that you're reading. So let's do some practice with affirmative. Here's an example sentence. I was in Mexico last year. So I could change my subject there to he or she or it, and that sentence will still work. But if my subject changes to you, we, or they, we need to use were. So here's another example with that. They were in Mexico last year. If we want to make a sentence in negative in the simple past tense, all we need to do is add not after our be verbs. Here are two examples. She wasn't sick last week. We weren't sick last week. Finally, if we want to make a yes or no question in the simple past tense, we're going to start with our past tense form of be, then our subject, and then the other information in our sentence. Here are two examples of simple past tense questions. Was he up to working late yesterday? Were you up to working late yesterday? Next, let's look at past perfect. This verb tense is not one that I've previously discussed on other videos, so I want to give you a little more background about past perfect. We tend to use this verb tense to talk about actions that were completed before some point in the past. Another way to think about it is that we'll use this verb tense when we want to talk about or stress that something happened before something else. So if the sequence or order doesn't matter when you're talking, you might not need to use past perfect. Simple past tense might be perfectly fine. To make the past perfect, we're going to use the past form of have, that's had, and then we'll use our participle, been. And that's going to be true no matter what our subject is, had been. Let's look at an affirmative example. I failed the test because I had been absent for 3 weeks. This sentence is telling me that my absence occurred before I failed the test. Let's look at an example that's negative. To make negative past perfect, we're going to add not right after the had. And when you hear native English speakers talking, it's likely that you'll hear them say hadn't. Here's a sentence. The ship hadn't been at sea for very long when passengers began to get sick. So that particular sentence is describing that the ship was at sea and not very long, and then passengers began to get sick. Finally, if we want to make a yes or no question in the past perfect, we're going to start with had, then our subject, and then the participle form of the verb. Here's an example. Had the spring weather been mild before this weekend? Finally, let's look at past progressive. To make this verb tense, we're going to use the simple forms of be in the past tense, so was or were, and then we'll use the ing form of the verb. Remember, we're using this to describe someone's actions, someone's behavior. We might also be describing something that was temporary. Many times we'll see past progressive used to describe a particular action that was occurring and was interrupted by something else. So let's look at 2 affirmative examples. These examples are really talking about behavior or how someone might have been acting at a particular time in the past. She was being selfish. You were being selfish. If we want to make negative past progressive statements, all we need to do is add not after our be verbs. So let's look at an example here. The child wasn't being safe when he decided to play in the street. And if our subject was plural, all we would change there is weren't being safe. You can see that in the second example. If we want to make a yes or no question in the past progressive, we're going to move the form of be first, then our subject, then the ing form of the verb. Here are 2 examples. Was he being unprofessional? Were we being unprofessional? Finally, today we're going to look at some phrases that are related to our verb be. The first phrase is be my guest, and it means please do. It's a way to give permission. So the way you'll hear this phrase used is generally in response to a question. Right? So imagine someone says, do you mind if I have a cookie? The other person says, be my guest. They're telling you, eat that cookie. Another phrase you might hear is be used to, and it means to be familiar. Here's an example sentence. I'm used to working on the weekends. Another phrase you might hear with be is be on the phone. Right? And this generally means you are in the process of using a cell phone or you are on a telephone. Here it is in a sentence. The dogs were barking while I was on the phone. The final phrase we're going to look at here is to be in touch or be in touch with. And these 2 phrases mean to have contact or communication. And if we include the with, we're going to say who we will be contacting or communicating. Let's look at 2 examples. The first one will not use with. The doctor will be in touch tomorrow morning. So this implies there will be a phone call, there will be some kind of message, maybe an email to be in touch. Here's another example. She'll be in touch with the students very soon. This is just another way to say she will be contacting the students. Thank you so much for watching today's video. I hope you'll tune in tomorrow as we continue to explore the be verb. We'll be talking about its use in future tenses. Thanks for watching and have a great day.